Hello again. Nice to see everyone in the studio and those who will be watching on YouTube and Vimeo and other channels. I've got another study in the 6,000 Years of Babylon series. We're up to book 3. I've written 5 books in the series. This is book 3. It's the thickest book because there's lots of illustrations in it. And they're available from Amazon as a paperback or Kindle download, or from the Barrett Ministries website, www.barrettministries.org.uk. So I've called this one Europe the Template. It's a simple study. I just want to show that the One World Order have used Europe as a template for how to take over the world. So if we look at Europe and the progression of it, till we ended up with a united Europe and a president of Europe, we'll see how that was a template for the one world system, where we'll get the whole world and a president of the world who'll be the man of sin, the one world dictator. I've got some quotes. This is from David Rockefeller. He's part of the One World Order at the elite. This was 1991, so it's 30 years ago, isn't it? And he said this was at a press conference. I think it was at the New York Times. It may not have been that, but it was a major newspaper in America. And he said it would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subjected to the likes of publicity during those years. But now the world is more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. This was openly a press thing. The supernatural sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national autodetermination practiced in past centuries. He's saying surely that the elite, a few elite and bankers, should run the world and not how we've gone for centuries. So they're open about it. That's 1991. George Washington, the first president of America. This is what he said. George Washington, this is 200 years ago, isn't it, when the first president, someday, following the example of the United States of America, there will be a United States of Europe. He's prophesying. They know the agenda. Don't forget, I showed he was a Mason. So this is their agenda. And it's hidden in plain view. They say these things and nobody takes any notice, or never. You know, as an Englishman, I never believed we'd be part of Europe, did you? We used to go to the continent. Are you going to Europe? In fact, when we were part of Europe, I used to go to Belgium a lot to preach, and I said, oh, it's nice to be in Europe. And they said, what are you talking about? I said, it's nice to come to Europe. They said, you're part of Europe. But in my mind, I was still English, not European. We're English. My kids growing up, they're European, of course, because they grew up. But we were English people. We weren't European. And so he prophesied it. Winston Churchill, I alluded to this yesterday. Oh, this is James Wartburg first. This is to the Senate on Senate Foreign Relations, 1950. This is 5 years after the war. We shall have a world government, whether or not you like it, by conquest or consent. We'll either deceive you into accepting it or we'll force you, but we will have one. That was 1950. They're coming out of the closet. For hundreds of years, if you talked about a one world government, people would have said ridiculous conspiracy things. But for the last 50, 80 years, they've been telling us what they're doing. This is Winston Churchill speaking in Zurich, the 19th, 1945, the year the war ended. If Europe were once united in the sharing of its common inheritance, there would be no limit to the happiness, to the prosperity and glory which its 300 or 400 million people would enjoy. What is this sovereign remedy? What's the remedy just after the war? It is to recreate the European family, or as much of it as we can, and provide it with a structure under which it can dwell in peace and safety and freedom. Masonic words. When you hear peace, peace, then sudden destruction. He'll obtain the kingdom by flatteries. peace, it's all right, everything's going to be nice. We must build a kind of United States of Europe. That's Winston Churchill. These people at the top, they know the plan. If we understand history, we can understand the future and where we are now. This plan of the one world government is hundreds of years old. But the last 50 years, they've started to come out of the closet and openly declare it. And they're planning the one world government by default or design, by coherence or desire. The whole world will vote in the one world dictator, and the Christians will be part of it because they voted for Bush and they voted for Tony Blair. Christians voted for Tony Blair. As soon as they heard, oh, Tony Blair's a Christian, didn't you know? Oh, well, he's the one to vote for. It's easy to persuade people, and Christians are naive. Well, it's not easy to rule the whole world and implement the mark of the beast. It's very difficult. People will rebel. Not every country will adhere to it. And to worship Satan personified, the statue that's going to be set up. So it can't happen without a detailed plan, and it's over hundreds of years. They're very patient. They don't mind if it doesn't happen in their lifetime, They're very patient. They're moving it on. They think we'll get a one world government soon. Winston Churchill's dead. George Washington's dead. But they were happy. They're part of the plan. They're the ones who prophesied. And they're very patient. It doesn't matter if it takes hundreds of years. Because it's Satan's plan, of course. So I believe we're very near the end of the plan. And the final net, which will trap the world so we can't buy or sell, I believe it's already begun. I believe God showed Joni and I that when 9/11, that was the beginning of the plan. That it's almost like Jesus said to Judas, what you've got to do quickly. Judas had to get permission. As soon as Jesus gave him the sop, it said Satan entered into Judas. He took the cup of devils, and the other disciples took the cup of blessing. The same cup can bring damnation. If you don't understand what you're doing, you bring damnation to yourself. Many were weak and sickly. But if you do know what you're doing, it's life and health. It's Christ. You're partaking of Christ, his nature, aren't you? So when he offered the sop to Judas, he took the cup of devils. Read Corinthians 10, not 11, because he says, can we take the cup of the Lord and the cup of devils? He explains about it, but we only read 1 Corinthians 11 verse 23 to the end. I know it verbatim because I heard it in the AOG church every Sunday, and it was just, monotonous really. I knew it, but I didn't understand it. And I needed to read chapter 10, where he's talking about the cup of devils and the cup of Christ. And clearly Judas took that. And as soon as he took the cup, Jesus said to him, what you've got to do, as soon as Satan entered him, what you've got to do quickly. He gave Satan in Judas permission to betray him. The devil can't do anything without permission from God, because he's a created being. He's not self-created where he can fight God. He's under God. He's created by God. And the Creator has control over creation, so he has control over Satan. He's not the opposite of God. He's the counterfeit, and he's a necessary evil to give us choice. I believe God made Satan as he is. I don't believe he was a worship leader in heaven and fell and tried to usurp God. That's, for me, ridiculous that a created being could usurp the Creator. But anyway, it's just not logic, and it's not biblical when you look at the context that they preach. So I believe that the man of sin and the devil will need permission. And I believe 9/11 started. God said, it's time to bring the end, Satan. Do your plan. How can Satan do anything without God's permission? His created being. I believe 9/11, you can trap the world now. You can bring about the plan. Satan thinks he's going to win, of course, because he's a megalomaniac, and they all believe in their own grandeur, don't they? The despots, they believe they can win. And I believe the pandemic was another major step to cause fear, because the devil seduces us through fear. People will do anything for fear. They'll give up the freedom for fear. The final net. This is biblical. Let me read Luke 21. I've not got many scriptures because I'm talking about the one world system. Luke 21. So likewise, when you see all these things come to pass, know the kingdom is near. Jesus is bringing the kingdom, so the return of Jesus. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all things be fulfilled. That's when you see the armies surrounding Jerusalem. The enemies are surrounding them. They have been for a long time. The Arab nations who hate the Jews. The nations have surrounded them, but not the armies. The armies aren't around Jerusalem yet. But when you see that generation won't pass. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. And take heed to yourselves, lest at any time, this is a warning to us, your heart be overcharged with satiety, drunkenness, cares of this life. The church are full of the cares of this life. And so the day come upon you unawares. For as a snare, trap you. The whole world will get trapped. But you know a snare, the mouse comes along. Oh, cheese, wonderful. He goes along, he's eating the cheese, unaware, and suddenly, snap, too late, he's trapped. Like a snare, you're walking on the ground, the bear, and suddenly he falls in the pit. He's caught out. And Jesus is saying, don't get caught out, because like a snare, it's gathering now, and suddenly, it'll catch everyone out, Christians included. Don't forget, God's people missed his first coming. So why should we think God's people, most of them, won't miss his second coming? Like a snare. Well, to control the world completely, let me get to the heart of the study. To control the world completely, I believe there's 7 areas that you have to control. If you want to control where you can't buy and sell, this is my understanding. The 7 main areas need to be in control of them. Number 1, and these are the order, it's sequential, so this is the order that it will happen. And all this order happened, I'll show you, in Europe. First of all, you need a world trade. You need the trade, the commodities to be won. Number 2, you need the world banking. So the banking has to be won. Number 3, you need a world government and a political system. Number 4, you need a legal system and a world court. All these need to be in place. You need a world religion, because religion is connected to politics. And you need a world religious leader, Antichrist. And you need a world dictator. I know people are looking for one person. They're looking for the Antichrist, who's the man of sin, the one world dictator. I think they're in error when Christians look for one man. There's 2 men, because there's a woman who rides the beast. Well, the beast is the one world dictator, but the woman who rides the beast is the woman, that's the counterfeit church, that's religion. Religion and politics go together. So who's controlling who? The woman's on the beast, so religion seems to be controlling the beast. But religion has no power except through politics. No power. The woman has no power. The beast has the power, but the woman is steering the power. The Catholic Church believe they have power to put kings in and depose of them. That divine right of kings, they believe they can, and they do it, they control the kings of the earth. When you read Revelation 18, the fall of Babylon, who controlled the kings of the earth, that's the woman who drives the beast. So there's a one world religious leader, Antichrist, because obviously his Antichrist is in place of Christ, and he always works with the one world dictator. And you'll see through history, those 2 work together. I'll show you. So let me go through Europe and see if it fits in your mind. Number 1, the trade and commerce. The first things that have to happen if you want to take over the world, the trade and commerce have to be abolished, the trade barriers. There has to be one trade. So there's no tariffs, no import duties. It has to be the same. Well, that happened in the 60s. the creation of the customs unions. Internal traffic and trade quotas, they disappeared. The process revived within the EU by a single European Act of 1986, aimed to complete single Europe market by the end of 1992. People didn't object because it was to their advantage. This wasn't us joining Europe. This was just trade. We could trade with Europe. See how the first move is very innocuous, very acceptable to the people. Oh, we can trade with Europe with no trade barriers. That's not England joining Europe. It's very subtle, but it's the first move. It was to my advantage as a Christian. We used to go to Holland a lot, and we used to take tapes of our singing. And when I got off the ferry, I used to go to Hook of Holland, that's it. From Harwich to Hook of Holland. And when we got off the boat, you had to go through the customs with your car. You had to declare anything to declare. And we had tapes, so we had to declare and pay duty. Import duty to sell them in Holland. So that was a pain, you know. But I thought, it's great, this trade barriers down. I could get off the ferry, car full of tapes and books and whatever we wanted to sell, drive into Holland, no problem. So it's to add advantage. Can you see? Businesses like it. We can trade with no trade barriers. So it was wonderful. It's interesting. You know what Europe was called at first? It was the EEC. Economic European Community. Economic. It was to do with trade. Do you know, as soon as they passed the act, the trade barriers go down. They drop one of the C's, and it one of the E's, and it became the EC, the European Community. They dropped the economic because they fulfill the plan. The trade barriers were down. So what do we need? The EEC. They're moving towards it, not economic community, because it's more than economics. They wanted the legal system and the political system. So it was called EEC. And they divided the whole world into trade blocks. All of them weren't implemented, but East Africa, you can get a passport for East Africa now, and it's 5 nations. You get a visa for Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, Kenya, and Uganda. 5 countries. They're getting a trade bloc. They're wanting to get a common currency for East Africa and West Africa. And there's trade blocs, America and Canada and Mexico. They're moving towards trade blocs. I think they've let those go because technology has moved on, so they don't need that now. Number 2, the finance. You know, finance was taken out of the hands of the people and the hands of the government. The Rothschilds hijacked the Bank of England after the Battle of Waterloo. You can read it in history. They control the Bank of England after the Battle of Waterloo. The IMF have taken over the Bank of America. The International Monetary Fund it's nothing to do with America. It's in the hands of private investors, the Rothschilds, the Rockefeller, the Warburgs, and so on. America has no control of the International Monetary Fund. It's independent. They've taken the money out of governments into banks, and every country in the world is in debt. I went online last week. You can check for yourself nationaldebtclocks.org, and that will tell you. And the figures are running round because they're going up all the time. And you can find the national debts of every country in the world. I've just put a few. Last week, it'll have gone up now another couple of million, because that's how debt works. $30 trillion US are in debt. UK, 3.3 trillion. The world debt is nearly 60 trillion in debt. The world is in debt to the bankers for 30 trillion. Can you see how they can control? They can collapse every economy in the world, just calling the debt. And this is what the world is in debt to, the World Bank. So they've taken over the world banking, haven't they, for sure? They could collapse the economy overnight. You know, it's terrible what they do to Africa. They put them in debt, they lend them money, and then they can't pay the debt. How can they? Because they bankrupt them. And you know what they do when they can't pay the debt? They say, well, give us your utilities. So the banks now own the water, or the gas, or the electricity. They own the power stations. They run Africa. I know because I go to so many African countries, and they're not in their hands. The diamonds, I said last night, Sierra Leone, London banking, London mining run all the diamond trade in Sierra Leone. They don't even run their own countries anymore because they're in debt, and debt traps you. So wars, revolutions, coups, they're all to control the world's finances through minerals, resources, food and commodities. Well, we know that Europe had a common currency, didn't they? The euro. And it'll happen with other trade blocks, I believe, although I think they've moved the agenda on now. You won't need any currency. It'll be digits. Units. So you work all week, and if you're a banker, you get 1,000 units. If you sweep the streets, you get 300 units. And when you buy something, they take a unit off. You don't need any money or credit cards, it's just units. Can you see how they've bypassed the money now? They crash economies to take over. It's very wicked. Do you remember Ireland was so prosperous years ago, and then they had a crash, didn't they? They went almost bankrupt. They had to borrow billions off the World Bank. They initiated the crash. What they do, every country has a rating, don't they? AAA is the highest, so America has AAA, maybe Britain, and some have AAA or AA1 or AA2, I forget how they do it. But all they do is lower a country's rating, so nobody will invest in it. You go for the top rate. So the bankers who invest the best returns, if a country like Germany, the ratings have dropped, we can't get our interest on it. So they take all the money out and put it where a highest rating. So that country goes bankrupt without the investment. So the bankrupt Ireland was almost bankrupt. And they had to borrow millions or billions of the International Monetary Fund. And they lend the money with favours. So now they control you. We'll lend you the money, but we want our man in your government to tell you how to run it. So most of these, Greece, they did the same with Greece. Remember, Greece went bankrupt. They did it. These are called the pigs nations. P-I-I-G. So it's Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. The bankers call us the pigs nation because it reads pigs, P-I-G-G-S, P-I-I-G-S. And Spain went bankrupt, didn't it? Greece, remember Greece? Terrible. But they collapsed it. They just took the ratings down, so all the bankers took the money out, and they had to borrow billions. But they put we'll lend you billions, but we need to tell you how to run your economy because you can't run it. You've gone bankrupt. So we'll put our man as advisors and tell you how to run the country. So that's how they get control. They pull the plug and then they control them. I hope this is not above your heads, but if you get and grasp it, how pernicious and wicked it is that they will bankrupt a country so they have to borrow billions of dollars with control. And that's how they're taking over. Every country is in debt. There's no country in the world that's not in debt now. That's why they went to Libya, Colonel Gaddafi, because he had a store of gold. Colonel Gaddafi, their country had a massive gold reserve, and he wanted to print his own currency away from the banks. And so they went to war with him. They made an excuse and took him out. Now he's part of the banking system. The only countries that are not really country, the Virgin Islands, Guernsey, Isle of Man, tax havens. They're not in debt to the World Bank because they're where the bankers, the elite, put all the billions, you see. So, but every national country is in debt. All right, the political, let's get through it. Well, Brussels and Strasbourg, were selected as headquarters for Europe. So there's countries that are selected to run the one world government. And I looked at them last night, the Vatican, Washington DC, London, and there may be more, maybe Singapore. That's a city-state. There are more city-states. Singapore doesn't belong to anywhere. It's a city-state. You can Google it, are there city-states in the world? And it'll tell you, and I know Singapore is, and maybe some other obscure ones. So there may be more. But Brussels and Strasbourg. Brussels for the political and Strasbourg for the World Court, isn't it? And different things. Well, we've got a president of Europe, but if you ask an Englishman, I'm talking as though we're still in Europe, we've come out, but that's only recently. But, you know, you can remember the last Prime Minister, can't you? I can remember the last President of America, you know, Bush and Clinton. So whoever would know the President of Europe at the present rate? I didn't know. I had the old one down, so I had to Google it this week. It's Roberta Metsola. She's the President of Europe, and she's Maltese. She's the President of Europe, but nobody would know. You see, it's secret. Can you see how the man of sin, he'll be the world dictator and nobody will know him until he decides to take power. They'll put him in like Europe at the moment. We don't think of the President of Europe, but they have one. And one day they'll get power. 10 kings will have power under the main one. You can see it all conforming, can't you? Well, Britain's now out of Europe. I'm not surprised. I hinted at it. When Britain didn't accept the euro in 2002, we decided we won't accept the euro. All of Europe accepted the euro. Britain didn't. And I thought, that's significant. We probably won't stay in Europe. Britain saved Europe from Hitler, saved Europe from Napoleon. You know, God used Britain to save Europe a few times. And maybe God will use Britain again. Who knows? I don't know. But I know when we didn't join the euro, it's temporary. We're doing it for the benefits. So when we came out, I wasn't surprised at all. I knew we'd come out because God showed me when we didn't join the euro. So the man of sin will obtain the kingdom by flatteries, just like Roberto has got in there and we don't even realise it. Daniel 11:21. I've got some scriptures just to let you know that this is based on the Bible. And in his estate shall stand up a vile person to whom they shall not give the honour of the kingdom. Who would vote for a vile person? No one. But he shall come in peaceably. You won't know he's vile till he manifests. No, none of the disciples suspected Judas, who's a type of Antichrist, the man of sin, because Judas is the only one in the Bible called son of perdition, son of damnation. The only other person that's mentioned son of damnation is the man of sin. 2 Thessalonians 2, until the man of sin is revealed, son of perdition. So Judas is a type of this man of perdition. And the disciples didn't know. When Jesus said somebody's going to betray me, they said, who is it, Lord? And maybe Judas said, who is it, Lord? Maybe he didn't know. I know he had his hand in the bag, so he was blind, wasn't he? Because you're blind when you disobey God. And they all asked, is it who? And Jesus said, to whom I give the sop to. And he gave the sop to Judas. And they must have thought, oh, well, he's the one who's going to betray Jesus. No, it can't be Judas. He's one of those who cast out devils. Jesus sent them out 2 by 2, and Judas was one of the couplets that he sent out. And he cast out devils and raised the dead and healed the sick and proclaimed the name of the Lord. They never suspected him. It was a devil's plant, wasn't it? Jesus knew from the beginning, but the disciples didn't know, and I don't think Judas knew till Satan entered him. How do you know? But Satan entered him, and he says, what you've got to do quickly. Because the verses before says, Judas was planning to betray him. But when Satan entered him, that's when he did it. So he'll obtain the kingdom by flatteries. He shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. That's why all the Christians, the churches, will vote for him, because he's a nice man. All American Christians voted for Bush, because he was a Christian, of course. There's books showing that Bush was born again. Trump, he's a fine Christian, of course. He's worshipping Satan. Everyone at the top is worshipping the God of this world. But all the Christians voted for Trump because he seemed a nice man. I suggest you Google Trump's apartment, his penthouse, and you'll see all the occult regalia about his apartment and see whether he's a Christian. Listen, he's a hard-nosed businessman, and you don't become a billionaire in New York unless you're in the club. You've got to do deals, and you've got to be a Mason or somewhere in the high rank. You can't do business in New York worth billions of dollars and build hotels unless you're in the club. I'll tell you, whatever profession, you've got to be in the club. If you're in music, you've got to sell the soul to the devil to be a multimillionaire. And then they have perfumes after the name, these pop stars now. They're multimillionaires with business, but they started off a singer, but they sold the soul to the devil. When you get up there, there's a cost. Child sacrifice. Many of them have sacrificed their own children to get power, because the devil will offer you it. All these things will I give you if you'll worship me. And to worship him, every god needs sacrifices. And Satan wants child sacrifice, people sacrifice. Wars are sacrifices to Satan, the blood sacrifices to Satan. All unlawful killing is a sacrifice to Satan. Every baby that's aborted is passing the children through the fire to Molech, because they used to take the babies out and put them in the incinerator before they realised they could use fetuses for makeup and drugs. They used to burn them in the incinerator. Is that not passing the children through the fire to Molech? This sacrifices to Satan, but Christians don't realise how serious it is. So America's taking these dictators out. Every dictator has to fall. Gaddafi was a dictator. They're against Korea, aren't they, North Korea, because it's a dictatorship. America wants every country to be democratic so they can vote in the Antichrist. It's democracy is the most devilish system of any system, because with a king, you can have a good or bad king. With a dictator, you can have a good dictator. It just means he's complete control. But if he looks after his people and prospers them, he's a good dictator. Democracy, the people think they have a say in the system. That's the deceit of it. The Bible is right. The rich rule over the poor. Have you ever known the poor ruling the rich? In world history, think about it. Any society has the poor people ruled over the rich. It can't happen, because the rich stay rich and keep... The only way the rich are rich is because there's poor. So they keep the poor, them poor, to maintain their riches. So the Bible's right in the rich rule over the poor. So when the poor think we have a say in the government, we can vote, it's for... Americans think, well, we're running the country, they're only our servants. How deluded are they? They're slaves to the system. The rich rule over the poor. So democracy, can you see how it's a Greek from Babylon? Aristotle talked about democracy, Plato. All our thinking, our culture comes from Babylon and Rome. All our mathematics, all our music, all our culture comes from Babylon. The power's always been in the hand of a few, hasn't it? In every empire. The legal, let me come to the legal. Well, the European Court in Luxembourg is the highest court in the EU. It's higher than the German court and higher than the English court. Do you know you could take your case to a higher court? If the highest court in the High Court in England went against you, you could go to the European Court and get it overturned, because it's higher court. Our courts only serve Europe. We've moved out now, but I'm talking as though when it was in. So German and French, that's the highest court in Europe, and that can overturn. Our working hours and our pensions and insurance, everything had to come in line with Europe. That political power, that legal power. We've got a world court. Did you know we have a world court? In 1945 by the United Nations Charter. It's the only organ of the UN that's not located in New York. It's in the Peace Palace in The Hague, Netherlands. I go to Holland a lot. I used to, and I've seen it. This is Dr. Martin Sheenan, US Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and Counter-Terrorism. He used the interview at the Commonwealth Secretariat to lay out plans for establishment of a World Court of Human Rights. I don't know whether it's been done yet. A global tribunal that would, for the first time, carry the mandate to try private companies. They could try a private country in Nicaragua to the World Court, or a business in England to the World Court. It's above every nation. They could take any company in any nation to court. And that was 2009, so maybe that's been implemented now. Often the laws are formed and passed, but they're not implemented. There's lots of laws that are already legal and passed, but they've not implemented yet. And people will get caught out because it's too late, because maybe the law's passed. The religion, we're coming to the end. Well, the World Council of Churches was formed in 1948, just after the war. This is the beginning of the One World Church. Those at the top always had plans to use it to unite Christians and control them to a One World Church. It'll embrace other religions, organisations, forerunner of the One World Religion. Christians don't realise how close Catholicism is to Islam. Do you know it's very similar? They both have to kill all the infidels. The Catholic Church, the Council of Trent, do you know all Protestants have to be annihilated? The Council of Trent. We're infidels. If you're not belonging to the Catholic Church, you're an infidel and you have to be killed by Inquisition or whatever. That's still, they've never rescinded that. And Islam's the same. We say, oh, Islam, they want to kill all infidels. Yeah, it's Catholic doctrine. And they have the same roots. Alberto Rivera, Joni's got some comics that are very good, his testimony. And he was very high up in the Jesuit situation. And he exposed the Catholic Church. And he said that, I don't know if you know about, we've got the Pope, the Pope Francis, but he's the white Pope. There's a black Pope. Do you know there's a black Pope? The head of the Jesuits is the black Pope, and he controls the white Pope. Francis was the first Jesuit Pope, wasn't he? Not by chance. And the general... So the highest Catholic is not the Pope, it's the Black Pope who's in the background. He was a Dutchman when I first did this. No, I'll tell you. All right, Cardinal Beer, the Jesuit General. So that's the Black Pope, the Jesuit General. Personally instructed me, so this is his testimony, personally instructed me in the origins of Islam. The Roman Catholic Church started Islam on purpose. They sent Jesuits to start it, to take the Arabs under their control and to secure Jerusalem for the last days. The Islam have the Mount, the rock, the church there. That's all right, it's part of the plan. Actually, the Arabs rebelled against Catholicism and there was a problem, but that was the plan. They have the same roots. Well, the world's invaded the church, hasn't it? With entertainment, politics, business, techniques and practices, New Age doctrines in the church. You go in any Christian bookshop, and if you have perception, you'll see occult books there. Christian fantasy. The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, that's occult. It's a mixture of paganism. C.S. Lewis brought paganism into his Christianity. I'm not saying he wasn't saved, but the Tales of Narnia, the faun and dancing naked round at midnight, Bacchus, that's a demon, Bacchus, it's a pagan god. all the names of it. It's pure witchcraft. Going into a wardrobe and walking through the other side into another world. Alice through the looking glass. Witchcraft uses a mirror because of the reflection. You look in a mirror and you transform through it. Alice through the looking glass. Alice in Wonderland is an occult parody. Lewis Carroll was on opium. He was an opium taker, and he was on full of opium when he wrote. How could you write that with the rabbit and the Mad Hatter and all that? But it's prophecy. All these books, the classics, are all prophecy of the devil that we read and give to our kids. We don't realise. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Little Red Riding Hood, the Lady in Red. The Whore of Babylon, and the Wolf, the Witch, the Lion and the Wardrobe. Why are we writing about witches? The Wizard of Oz, and the White Witch, the Good Witch, and the Bad Witch of the North. Can you see? They're all steeped in paganism. We tell our kids these stories. We know a woman, we're going to see this woman on Tuesday. She lives in Southport now, and she was in the occult deep, and she says, it was standard reading when you were in witchcraft, the Narnia tales, to your children. Standard reading, because it gets them used to the other side. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and Mary Poppins. I was on my way home from Scotland. I was tired, and I thought I need to stay awake. I put Radio 4 on to try and have some intelligent conversations to keep me awake. And it was a woman who wrote Mary Poppins. She was being interviewed, and I wasn't really interested, but my ears picked up when she said this. And they said, why did you write Mary Poppins? It's a wonderful story. It's made into a film. She says, I wrote Mary Poppins to introduce children to the other side. Sorry, my wife's just corrected me. She said, I wrote it to introduce adults to the other side. In other words, and made a nice story out of it. There's books that fly across it. The supernatural happens with Mary Poppins, and books fly across the thing. And she says, it's all right. And the kids see it, and she says, no. And it's to introduce adults and children to the supernatural. That's why she wrote it. These people are in the occult, just like the, what's the modern one? Harry Potter. She's not a witch. She knows a lot about witchcraft to not be a witch, doesn't she? And Christians, Pentecostal churches are having trips and taking the congregations to see Harry Potter films, and it's occult. The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien, it's all occult. But people don't realise it. It's literature, it's good literature. Yeah, the devil uses good literature. I was in Nigeria, in the Bible Belt, that's up in the Plateau State, the north, in Jos, and I went in a Christian bookshop. I was amazed. There was books by Norman Vincent Peale, Power of Positive Thinking, and all these occult books, and they didn't know the difference, because preachers say you need to have a positive attitude, and so they thought, this is a good book. The Power of Positive Thinking. He's an occultist, a New Ager. And you can go in any bookshop and you'll see Christian fantasies about supernatural happenings. Like Christians don't know the difference. Imagination is healthy. God gave us imagination. Fantasy is something that couldn't happen. Imagination is something that can happen. I can close my eyes and be on a beach in Bermuda. I can feel the breeze, and I can imagine the waves lapping at my feet, and a beautiful woman feeding me grapes. I've got a good imagination. But that could happen, couldn't it? If I could find the money to go to Bermuda, and if I could find a beautiful woman, and if I could afford the grapes to bribe her to feed me, but it could happen. But fantasy, flying through the air like a bird, that couldn't happen. That's dangerous. Fantasy is dangerous. Imagination is good. You need to demark the difference. God's not into fantasy. He uses imagination, but not fantasy. And a lot of the Christian books are now into Christian fantasy. And I say they're occult at the roots. Well, Let me read you some quotes. Catholicism, by its own admission, is the religion of Babylon. Anglicans are rushing into Rome. The appointment of the Archbishop of Canterbury in the same week as Pope Francis was inaugurated is not by chance. Let me read what he said. This is the Archbishop of Canterbury, speaking in an Anglican conference in London, sponsored by Holy Trinity Brompton. They're into Catholicism. The Catholic Archbishop said, Archbishop of Canterbury, Most Reverend Justin Welby, had strange similarities to the new Pope. The two elections were a little miracle, and a sign from the Lord that the two churches should work closer towards Christian unity. That was Cardinal S. Schomburg, Archbishop of Vienna. Amazing, isn't it? Well, let me read you some quotes. Quotes from the church itself. It's interesting to note how often our church has availed herself of practices which were commonly used among pagans. This is a Catholic Church speaking. Thus it is true, in a certain sense, that some Catholic rites and ceremonies are a reproduction of those pagan creeds. This is a Catholic legal document, Externals of the Catholic Church, her government ceremonies, festivals, sacraments and devotions. Page 156. And the next one. This is the story of Catholicism, page 37. It has often been charged that Catholicism is overlaid with many pagan incrustations. Catholicism is ready to accept that accusation and even to make it her boast. The great god Pan is not really dead, he's just baptized. He's been sprinkled with holy water, so it's all right. So long as you put the holy water on something pagan, it becomes Christian. Do you know the god Pan? Elton John has the god Pan on his gates, his wrought iron gates. He's got the god Pan. It's the god who represents freedom, love, and sexuality. Amazing, isn't it? Another quote, Jay. The use of temples and these dedicated to particular saints and ornamented on occasions with branches of trees, incense, lamps, candles, Voltaire, offerings and recovery from illnesses, holy water, asylums, holy days and seasons, use of calendars, processions, blessings on the field, sacerdotal vestments, the tonsure, the ring in marriage, turning to the east, images at a later date, perhaps the ecclesiastical chant, the Kali-Ishram, and all pagan origin, and sanctified by their adoption into the Catholic Church. So long as the Catholic Church adopt it, it doesn't matter if it's pagan, it's baptized. The development of Christian doctrine by John Henry Cardinal Newman. Don't know if you know anything about Cardinal Newman. He was an Anglican, wasn't he? And he turned to Catholicism and became one of their great speakers. There's a great school, Cardinal Newman School, in not far from here. And the next one, Joni. This is The Faith of Our Fathers, 1917, by Cardinal Gibbons. The penetration of the religion of Babylon became so general when known that Rome was called the New Babylon. They called Rome the New Babylon. It's amazing, isn't it? This is the Catholic Church confessing it. Life of Constantine. In order to attach to Christianity great attraction in the eyes of nobility, the priest adopted the outer garments and adornments which were used in pagan cults. All the vestments of the Anglicans and the Catholic Church are pagan in origin. It's what witches wear, the robes. Why do we need robes to minister to people? The purple and the ermine and the robes. Why would you need robes to minister to anyone? Did Paul put robes on? The priesthood's finished, hasn't it? Paul, a servant of God, not a priest. You can't be a priest in flesh and blood. We're not priests and kings yet, because you can only be a priest after Aaron, flesh and blood, and that line's finished, or a priest after Melchizedek, and you need to have a spiritual body to be a priest after Melchizedek. Jesus was only a priest after Melchizedek when he rose from the dead. He wasn't a priest after Aaron because he came from the wrong tribe, and you can't be a priest. I'm not the priest of my household because my wife's a priest according to Christians, the priesthood of all believers. Where on earth did they get that from? The Bible doesn't talk about the priesthood of all believers, because if I'm the head of the house, I've got to be the high priest if my wife's a priest to be the head, haven't I? It's just nonsense when you look at the Bible. There's only two orders of priesthood, the Aaronic, which we can never belong to. We're not Jews and we're not from the tribe of Judah, or the Melchizedek priesthood. There's only two priesthoods in the Bible, and you've got to have neither mother or father. You've got to be an eternal being to be after Melchizedek. That's why Jesus came as a prophet. He rose again as a priest. He's now the priest after the order of Melchizedek. David prophesies it. And when he comes, he's king. And when we get the new body and we reign, then we're kings. We're potential priests and kings, but we're not ruling yet, are we? Where's your kingdom? I've got Christ's kingdom within me, but we'll reign. That's not in my notes. Let me carry on. So I'm not singing out Catholicism. It's just that we're all daughters of Babylon, all right? So I'm saying if we're all daughters of Babylon, the revival comes out and gets rid of a lot of the practices, but then go back to them. That's the problem, they revert back to them. The Reformation was only half came out. It kept a lot of the practices, and we adopted them into Protestantism. But we need another Reformation to get fully out. God wanted a relationship with man. So religion in any form is a counterfeit. Europe's has started to implement Sunday observance again. I mentioned it yesterday. Germany and Croatia have passed laws that Sunday is the holy day. And that Germany have passed laws, I checked it this week, that for rest on Sunday, forced rest. It's part of Catholicism to worship Sunday, because the host is the sun. He holds the host up. It's a round circle. It's the sun, isn't it? Babylon worships the sun. That's why they face east. That's why even Anglican churches face east, because that's where the sun rises. They worship the east. You face the east to worship. It says it in Jeremiah. It says they're in there facing the east, because that's the sun worship, Babylonian worship. The Bible doesn't say the churches have to face east or west or north. We just meet together, don't we? It's immaterial. Well, Satan's aim is to the worship of the whole world, a one-world religion. And Satan needs a mediator. I'll just give some facts to show that the religious and the politics need to work together. You need a mediator. Even God wants a mediator to turn everyone to Christ. Christ is a mediator to take us to God. And Satan wants an antichrist to turn them to him. So Napoleon, he was a potential one-world dictator, wasn't he? He made a concordat with Pope Pius VII. He made an agreement. He got all the cardinals to vote for Napoleon. Hitler made a concordat with Pope Pius XII. X and 2 ones, that's 12, isn't it? Yeah. In 1933. And Hitler wouldn't have got in power without the Catholic cardinals voting for him and telling all the Catholics to vote for him. Mussolini would never have got in power without the Catholic Church. They make concordats, the political. When any man of God is telling you to vote for a dictator, it's that unholy alliance. Beware. When a man of God says you need to vote for this man, we're not into politics, are we? Let them get on with it. We're not of this world. How can an alien vote? I don't belong to this world. If I go to Africa and they're having elections and I say, oh, I'd like to vote for that president, he seems a nice man, they'll say, you can't vote. You're an alien. You don't belong to Africa. Well, I don't belong to this world, so how can I bother myself with the affairs of this world? And Christians say, well, that's irresponsible. You should choose the best one, the lesser of evils. I say I'm not voting for any evils. They're all corrupt. They're all corrupt. No one stands for God. They say they're a Christian, but what do? Stand up and say, I'm against homosexuality, I'm against transgenderism. They'd be out of politics. the next day. You can't do it. You can't get in there and fight it. We fight outside. We're lights in the darkness. We don't become a bit dark to introduce them to the light. We're separate. We're holy. We're not of this world. That's our challenge to them. Religion has its hymns. All religion needs music. The rock music is the music of Satan and Babylon. The witch doctor, they always have music and chants, don't they, to get people in an altered state of consciousness. Did you know that Europe have adopted a hymn? I'll read it to you. In 1972, the Council of Europe adopted Beethoven's Ode to Joy theme as an anthem. They have an anthem that we're all going to have to sing. There'll be a one world anthem, worshipping the thing. It was adopted by the EU leaders as the official anthem of the European Union. They've got a national anthem like God Save the Queen. This is the national anthem of the European Union. This will happen in the one world and it'll be worship to the beast. The EU website says, without words, in the universal language of music, it unites everyone, you see. This anthem expresses the European ideals of freedom, peace, solidarity, same words cropping up. Whether this will become the one world anthem remains to be seen, but we have the pattern for procedures. Let me read some of the words of it. Joy, beautiful spark of the gods, daughter of Elysium. In fervent rapture we enter the heavenly fire. Thy sanctuary, your magic reunites. This is all Satanism, isn't it? What fashion strictly divine? All men will become brothers, one world, where your gentle wing rests. That's the hymn of Europe. Beautiful spark of the gods, daughter of Elysium. It's occult. I don't know whether that would be the one that will all worship the beast to, but there'll be, can you see how they set it in there, one world religion, so you need a one world national anthem to worship the beast, to unite all nations with music. When you hear the sound of the flute, the harp, the sackbut, all kinds of instruments, worship, sing this song, spark, beautiful spark to the gods, your magic reunites. They'll sing it, because they've been programmed to sing it. So let me come to the last one. Or the next to the last. So if you've got a one world religious, you need a one world religious leader, don't you? The Antichrist in place of Christ, it's obvious. Well, the popes from the beginning have been Antichrist. In fact, the pope's got it written on his crown, Vicarius Christi. When the Pope's got Vicarius Christi, it means I'm in place of Christ. He's God's shepherd on earth. He's Christ. His name means Antichrist, Pope Pontifex Maximus. Pontifex Maximus. So that doesn't make him the one world dictator, the beast. That makes him the mediator to get the whole world to worship the second beast in Revelation 13. And lastly, you need a one world dictator. You need a head to control the whole world. We've got a United States of Europe. We've got a president. And one day we'll get a president of the world. I believe Europe's the template because I can see this has all happened in Europe. And it's a perfect plan with the commerce and then the legal and the political and the religious. Notice the religious comes at the end when everyone's united. Then they bring the religion in. Because at the end of Satan's plan is worship. Like God wants worship from a true heart of your own free will. Satan wants worship from our own free will. That's why his plan is to seduce us. If we won't be seduced, fiery furnace. If you won't take the mark, you won't worship. Because people major on the mark, but that's not the major. It says, whoever will not worship the beast or take the number of his name or the mark. But it mentions worship. That's the key. When you won't worship. Those who worship will get the mark and they'll be happy. If you won't worship the beast, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego bow. When you won't bow, fiery furnace. And those who came to the last conference, Nebuchadnezzar said, oh well, I'll give you another chance. Maybe you didn't hear words. Next time you hear it, Satan will give you many chances because he doesn't want to use force. He wants you to choose to worship him like God. God won't use force, and the devil doesn't want to, but in the end he's such a megalomaniac. If you won't bow, right the fiery furnace, I'll annihilate you. Let me finish by reading 2 Thessalonians 2, 1-4. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 1-4. Now we beseech you, brethren. Beseech is a strong word, isn't it? I'm begging you, you beseech. I'm on my knees, I'm beseeching you. So Paul's passionate that we understand. I'm beseeching you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus and our gathering unto him. That seems as though it's the same time, doesn't it? He's coming and we're meeting him in the air. I believe that's my understanding of the rapture. We meet him in the air. In other words, you don't meet someone unless they're coming to meet you. It's a mutual meeting. That you'll be not soon shaken in mind or troubled, neither by spirit nor by word, nor by letter from us, as the day of Christ is at hand. Don't let anyone deceive you. I don't believe Jesus could come tonight. I know people say, oh, are you ready? But he says, don't let anyone deceive you. This day will not happen. Let's go on, Jay. Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come. So Jesus will not come. We won't be gathered unto him, except first as a falling away. Well, I can see a falling away, but I can't see the next part. And the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. That's the same title of Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Jesus with a kiss. So the one world dictator will betray the church with a kiss. They'll say, we love Jesus. And we'll all follow him. He betrayed him with a kiss, didn't he? And Jesus called him friend. He said, friend? Fancy calling Judas a friend? Amazing. The man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God. Well, nobody's done that yet. Nobody said, I'm higher than God. Even the Pope doesn't say he's higher than God. He says, I'm Christ on earth, I'm the shepherd, but he doesn't put himself above God. But this man will. So we've got a clue, haven't we? We shouldn't miss it. Or that is worship, so that he, as God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So I believe Europe's the template. And we can see it happening with the trade, with the religion building up, with all these things, the economic, the world court. We can see them all being implemented. We've got a World Health Authority. I never mentioned the health. It's controlled. England are under the World Health Authority. Boris Johnson said, we don't want to vaccinate everyone when he first came out. 2 days later, he vacillated and changed his mind, and people said, oh, he doesn't know what he's doing. It was pressure from the World Health Authority. Every country in the world succumbed to the pressure of the World Health Authority. That's some power, isn't it? Anyway, I don't need to say any more. Let me pray that God will help us. Father, I love to talk about holiness and discipleship, Lord, but you put it on my heart to expose Babylon, and I've done that, Father. I pray that people won't go deep into it, Lord, and spend all the time looking at facts and figures about Babylon, because that's not what it's about. It's just to be aware, Lord, that the whole world lieth in wickedness, that the whole religious system is full of Babylon and paganism. And now's the time to get out, Lord. That's my message. Become the bride. Get holy. Get rid of the spots and wrinkles. And I pray, Lord, that people won't be deceived by Satan into getting in and looking at the occult, because that's not my intention, Lord. My intention is to open people's eyes so they can prepare themselves for the coming of Christ as a holy and spotless bride. Help us, Father. Help me to get the balance right. I ask it in your name. Amen. God bless you. Have a wonderful week. Hope you tune in for the next study. There's many more to come yet. Another 25 maybe. God bless you.